Today, we're exploring the surprisingly fascinating, and yes, slightly scandalous history of wiping medieval behinds. Because in the late Middle Ages, one of the most intimate and peculiar positions in a royal court was that of the groom of the stool. And no, when we say stool, we're not talking about something you sit on. We mean exactly what you think we mean. That got us thinking, if history can tell us who was trusted to wipe a king's royal posterior, then the story of bum wiping itself must be full of hidden gems. And once we started digging, we couldn't stop. So buckle up, and welcome to Bottom Mopping with Medieval Madness. Rough around the edges. Quick pause. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. It's always hilarious to see how far around the world this very royal topic is reaching. From the dawn of civilization, humans have had to deal with one universal problem: what to do after doing the deed. And though we can only guess at all the ways our ancestors got creative, the evidence we do have is fascinating. People likely used whatever nature offered. Moss, soft feathers, bundles of leaves, tufts of grass, perhaps even fur, smooth sticks, snow, or, in less fortunate moments, simply their hands. Some methods sound clever, others downright desperate. In fact, one Bronze Age civilization from the Greek island of Crete is thought to have invented the world's first flushing toilet over 4,000 years ago. Imagine that, a functioning toilet in the Bronze Age while half the world was still squatting behind a bush. The ancient Greeks, ever practical, used pebbles or even small shards of broken pottery called ostraca to clean themselves. And here's where it gets truly interesting. In classical Athens, when a citizen was voted to be banished, his name was scratched onto one of those shards. If enough votes were cast against him, he was exiled for 10 years. That's where the word ostracism comes from. Some researchers have even suggested a darkly humorous twist, that after such votes, those same pottery shards may have been used to wipe, literally soiling the name of the condemned one last time. Petty revenge, Athenian style. Thousands of these poo stones have been uncovered in both Greek and Roman toilets scattered across the Mediterranean. Many smooth and worn down from regular use. They typically ranged from 3 to 10 centimeters in diameter, just large enough to do the job without causing too much damage. Still, one can only imagine that long-term use of such a method might leave one with an unpleasantly raw rear end, and perhaps a lifelong case of hemorrhoids. One of the most amusing archaeological finds comes from Orvieto, Italy. A Greek wine cup from the 6th century BCE showing a man squatting, balancing with a cane in one hand, and holding a pebble in the other, ready to clean himself. The Greeks even had a proverb that said, 3 stones are enough to wipe one's ass. Which makes you wonder, was there a debate over whether 3 was the magic number? Or were some people daring enough to get by with 2? When we move into the Roman world, things get even more fascinating and slightly more horrifying. Remains of communal toilets have been found all over the former empire. And here we find the tursorium, a sponge attached to a stick used to scrub oneself clean. The process went like this. After finishing one's business, you would dip the sponge into the water channel running in front of the latrine, reach through the keyhole-shaped opening beneath you, clean yourself, and then rinse the sponge before leaving it to soak in a bucket of vinegar or brine for the next person. Yes, the next person. The same sponge, shared by dozens of strangers. Public hygiene standards clearly had a different definition back then. The Roman philosopher Seneca the Younger even tells the chilling story of a Germanic gladiator who took his own life by hiding in the latrine and forcing the tursorium down his throat. The very same sponge on a stick used to scrub filth became the instrument of his death. Grim, but it gives us a clear picture of just how ever-present these tools were in Roman daily life. In Herculaneum, one of the cities buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, archaeologists have discovered small pieces of cloth in the sewers. Some believe these may have been used for wiping, which would have been a considerable luxury, given that every piece of cloth was hand-woven and costly at the time. Using it for personal hygiene would have been a mark of true extravagance. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, things were getting a bit more civilized. In China, Records as far back as the 6th century mention the use of paper for this very purpose. The politician and scholar Yen Jitue famously wrote, "Paper on which there are quotations or commentaries from the 5 classics, or the names of sages, I dare not use for toilet purposes. Fair enough, even in matters of hygiene, some things are sacred." By the Tang dynasty, an Arab traveler visiting China remarked that the Chinese did not use water for cleaning after relieving themselves, but only paper. And by the 14th century, production of toilet paper in China had scaled to an astonishing level. Some sources estimate that up to 10 million packages, each containing between 1,000 and 10,000 sheets, were being produced every year. That's right. Centuries before the West would even dream of such a thing, the Chinese had already created an industry out of it. Proof that even the most basic human necessities can drive innovation. In 1393, during the Ming Dynasty, the scale of imperial hygiene was nothing short of astonishing. In Zhejiang province alone, records show that 720,000 sheets of blotting paper were produced annually, destined for the court in Nanjing. And this wasn't just any paper, this was royal-grade toilet paper. Imperial archives reveal that Emperor Hongwu's household went through roughly 15,000 sheets of extra soft paper every year. And yes, each one was perfumed. Imagine living in a world where even your toilet paper smells like a bouquet. But not everyone in history shared the same enthusiasm for paper hygiene. The 16th century French writer and humorist François Rabelais gave us one of the most colorful commentaries on the subject through his giant protagonist, Gargantua. In a famously irreverent passage, Gargantua conducts a personal experiment to find the best way to clean himself after doing his business. He tries everything, from a lady's velvet mask, which he claimed left him feeling, quote, most pleasant in the fundament, to, rather disastrously, a live March-born kitten, which, as you might imagine, ended very badly for Gargantua's posterior. He eventually dismissed paper as inadequate, insisting that, quote, the Ballocks always get a smear when paper is used to wipe the rear. His final verdict? The very best wiping device, in his opinion, was a soft, downy gosling, preferably one warmed in the sun. Crude? Yes. Memorable? Absolutely. Meanwhile, across Asia, hygiene innovations took a slightly more practical turn. When Buddhist monks and missionaries spread the faith from India into China and Japan, they also brought with them the salaka, a wooden or bamboo hygiene stick, often shaped like a small spatula. Its ends were wrapped with cloth and used to scrape away waste. The brilliance of the salaka lay in its reusability. Cheap, durable, and easily cleaned. Archaeologists have even uncovered examples of these sticks from a Han Dynasty military outpost in Dunhuang, dating back nearly 2,000 years. And here's where things get both fascinating and a little gross. Preserved traces of fecal matter on these ancient sticks contained eggs of whipworm, roundworm, tapeworm, and even Chinese liver fluke, a grim reminder that intestinal parasites were a common part of daily life. Fast forward to the Tudor period, and things take a decidedly royal and oddly personal turn. The most powerful political arena was no longer Parliament, but the royal court. If you wanted influence, you had to get close to the king. Very close. Tudor historian David Starkey describes how, in 1493, Henry VII broke with centuries of tradition and established a brand new branch of the royal household, the Privy Chamber. Previously, two major departments existed, the Lord Steward's Department, which handled food and drink, and the Lord Chamberlain's Department, which managed ceremony and personal service to the king. Henry VII's creation of the Privy Chamber shifted the balance of power. This was the king's private world, where access was carefully controlled, and where his most intimate servant held the oddly prestigious title of Groom of the Stool. Now, when we say stool, let's be clear, this was not a piece of furniture. It referred to the king's close-stool chair, essentially a portable toilet. The Groom of the Stool's job was to manage this throne behind the throne. He was responsible for preparing the commode, assisting the king in undressing, and yes, very likely helping wash and wipe the royal backside when duty called. It may sound unthinkable today, but this was one of the most trusted and coveted positions in the kingdom. The groom had unrivaled access to the king, literally seeing him at his most vulnerable, and this intimacy translated into power. Whenever the monarch traveled, which he often did, moving from palace to palace or even staying at the estates of his wealthiest subjects, the groom was tasked with transporting the closed stool chair, finding a suitable private chamber, hanging curtains, setting out bowls of clean water, and ensuring towels and washing implements were ready. This role required not just loyalty but discretion, delicacy, and absolute trustworthiness. Imagine being responsible for unfastening the layers of the king's heavy, fur-lined winter garments, just to make sure he could relieve himself in comfort, and then redressing him again. The man Henry VIII chose for this most intimate role was Hugh Dennis, whose grandfather had been a knight. Dennis didn't just help with the king's ablutions. He leveraged this proximity into an extraordinary career, eventually becoming treasurer to the king. As Starkey explains, the creation of the Privy Chamber massively expanded the groom's influence. He wasn't just a servant. He became the chief officer of this new royal department, with the ability to shape court politics from behind the scenes. In other words, the man who managed the king's bathroom breaks also had the king's ear, which meant he could make or break the fortunes of ambitious courtiers. The groom of the stool was more than a helper. He was a gatekeeper, a confidant, and in many ways, the most powerful toilet attendant in history. He was more than just a servant. He was the gatekeeper to the king himself, controlling who could approach his majesty and overseeing every personal necessity of the day. The groom of the stool eventually became far more than a royal toilet assistant. He managed the king's private finances, running the account that would later be known as the Privy Purse, making him a key figure in royal politics and court life. When Henry VIII ascended the throne, he elevated the role even further. He handed the prestigious, if slightly awkward-sounding, job of royal bum-wiper and chief confidant to his closest friend, Sir William Compton. But Henry, never a man to do things by halves, also appointed 6 esquires of the body, attendants whose duties included waking the king at 8 a.m., helping him change his shirt, hose, and undergarments, assisting him at mealtimes, and finally putting him to bed at night. It was a life of intimate service, but also one of extraordinary influence. Eventually, the office began to lose its significance. With the reign of Mary I and then Elizabeth I, the groom of the stool was gradually phased out. The last man to officially hold the title was likely Michael Stanhope, who served young King Edward VI. Stanhope's fate was grim. He was executed for felony shortly before Edward's death. But the position itself evolved rather than disappeared. Under the Stuart monarchs, the job was reinvented as the groom of the stole, now a role focused more on dressing and undressing the king than on tending to his more, shall we say, earthy needs. Still, the intimacy remained, and with it the potential for enormous power. For most ordinary medieval people, however, there was nothing glamorous about daily hygiene. Chamber pots were standard, and cleaning oneself usually meant using whatever nature provided. A handful of straw, moss, grass, or even snow. Those who could afford it might carry scraps of cloth. By the 18th century, some gentlemen even brought books into the privy, not just to read, but to repurpose a page when they were finished. One anecdote from 1747 tells of a friend of Lord Chesterfield, who would carry a cheap edition of Horace into the necessary house, read a few lines, then tear out the page and offer it as a sacrifice to Cloacina, the Roman goddess of sewers. Yes, there was literally a goddess of drains and public toilets, and she even had her own shrine. Imagine praying before relieving yourself. It wasn't until 1857 that a New Yorker named Joseph Gaiety created the first commercially marketed toilet paper. He sold it as medicated paper for the water closet, warning that regular printed paper was dangerous because the ink might irritate the skin. In 1880, the first English patent for toilet paper was issued, but it wasn't until 1936 that the soft, cushioned version we know today became widely available. Even then, change came slowly. Through much of the early 20th century, people in Britain were still using newspaper squares, hung from a hook in the outhouse. In fact, the Farmer's Almanac, which has been published since 1792, became so popular for this dual purpose that the publishers started pre-drilling a hole in each copy, making it easier to hang on a nail in the lavatory. Across the Atlantic, early Americans often used dried corn cobs, yes, corn cobs, before eventually switching to newsprint and catalog pages. It's safe to say that modern bathroom breaks are a lot more luxurious. Today, we live in what can only be called a golden age of bathroom luxury. We have indoor plumbing, flushing toilets, and even bidets that do half the work for us. And the toilet paper options? Endless. Cushioned rolls, quilted rolls, scented rolls, aloe-infused, coconut oil-infused. We even have novelty scents like vanilla, raspberry, rhubarb, and sugar plum. If there's a peak of human civilization, it might just be right here, the pinnacle of butthole hygiene. So, the next time you sit on your modern porcelain throne, take a moment to be thankful you're not reaching for moss, a broken shard of pottery, or, yes, the dreaded communal sponge on a stick. And speaking of gratitude, thank you for joining me on this weird, wonderful journey through medieval hygiene. If you're watching this while sitting on the toilet, yes, you, don't think I can't see you. Do us all a favor and wash your hands when you're done. What do you think? Would you have survived medieval bathroom habits? Or would you have led a revolution just to invent soft toilet paper? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing how you all imagine life back then. If you enjoyed this cheeky little dive into history, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths. We bring you new stories about the strange, hilarious, and sometimes downright disturbing sides of the past. Ring the bell so you never miss the next trip back in time. Until next time, may your water be warm, your towels soft, and your bathroom breaks blessedly comfortable. Stay curious because history still has plenty of weirdness left to uncover.